Allow about friends. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Last week I had my COVID test and it's negative, but I live in Round Rock, Texas, and 3 of our Baha'is have COVID-19.
Oh, no.
So I'm reading a prayer for healing for them. Thy name is my healing, O my God, and remembrance of thee is my remedy. Nearness to thee is my hope, and love for thee is my companion. Thy mercy to me is my healing and my succor, in both this world and the world to come. Thou verily art the all-bountiful, the all-knowing, the all-wise. Baha'u'llah.
Thank you very much, Don. And we'll dedicate this session also to the friends in Lebanon that really an incredible catastrophe of suffering that happened there. And so I want to dedicate also our thoughts, our prayers to those friends there. Really welcome back. So I'm going to just recap for all the friends where we are. So this is our Advent of Divine Justice course. And this is a letter that has been written December 25th, 1938 to the North American Baha'i community. And in this letter, this is after 16 years of nurturing the Baha'i community. So from 1921, the passing of His Holiness Abdul Baha, to let me make sure my math is right, 1937, that's right, to 1937, that was the launch of the first 7-year plan, okay? And then in 1938, in December, the beloved guardian sends this message, okay? And this message is really the beloved guardian's first message of great weight, as they say, to the North American Baha'i community. And this message is unique in the sense that it's very direct and very, the word I would use is, it's very blunt, you know, it doesn't hold back. That is the words I would use. He doesn't hold back in his frankness, and as he is addressing the challenges of not only the American Baha'i community, but the greater community, okay? That is a very brief address to recap. And in the recap we just shared, he addresses these 3 weapons. And these 3 weapons, can anyone state them really quickly? It was in the first part. Does anyone know them off the top of their head? Not yet. We're going to get to all of them in much greater detail. So the first weapon, okay, that we'll be addressing is rectitude of conduct. Okay? Rectitude of conduct. The next weapon that we're going to be addressing is freedom from racial prejudices, as well as a chaste and holy life. So these are the 3 weapons that the beloved guardian goes into great detail on. And we're going to address all the different ramifications of these that the beloved guardian talks about. And also, as this is so timely, it cannot be any more timely that we're studying this letter, especially in the aspects of freedom from racial prejudices. And with everything that is going on in society, and all these wonderful Baha'is around the world studying this message, as well as sharing content and pictures. Have you seen it all over the internet, as well as our Supreme Body writing these lovely message and our National Spiritual Assembly writing letters. This adds to the content of this section that I'm putting in part 15 and part 16, as well as I'm going to give you further assignments of reading and studying as we get and as we approach these sections, as well as I also want to afford time in our sections to really talk about how can we in our communities, in our great state of Texas, in the South, how can we openly talk about these issues, not hide behind the topics of such as race, you know? And we need to be very open and reflect on this. Does our Baha'i community reflect the diversity of flowers? Does it reflect? Or is it very one-sided? Or are we very cliquish in our gatherings? Are we just talking in Persian? You know, we have to be very focused on how are we approaching this topic. Are we embracing our brothers, the pupil of the eye? Are we really embracing them with love and giving them the true attention that they deserve? So this is something, as we approach this, we have to really reflect on how are we in our communities approaching this, so that slowly, gradually, we transform ourselves, our communities, that hopefully that our communities will be better representations of this unity of the human family, so that it can be a model for the generality of mankind. So this is something that I wanted to share with you as we get closer and closer to these topics. I will share more and more with you gradually, okay? And so let us, without any further ado, start getting into our session for today. I've provided the entire class, as well as the whole world, on YouTube, complete recording of the Advent of Divine Justice. I finished it and placed it on YouTube, and I'll share the link with you. So I know I did that for two reasons. One, to provide a good audio recording of it and split into parts that match our sections of our parts for our study. Number two, also for myself to know how long does it take to read each section. So it affords me time to balance out parts, right? So for example, I know now part 21 takes half an hour to read, you know? Kind of gives me a mental map of time of, like today's section, if we read it well, takes about 3 minutes. It's 2 paragraphs. So kind of gives me a gauge. Excellent. So there we go. Let us now get into, I'm going to now share screen. Everyone doing okay? Give me a thumbs up. Anytime, I love it. So we're getting into our section for today. Let me full screen this. Okay, here we go. Let me make this so I can see a lot more faces. I like doing that on my little screen on the side. Okay, so today we're going to cover paragraphs 10 and 11. And in this section, the beloved guardian goes into greater detail of the signs of convulsion. And can anyone define convulsion? And one of my dear friends to my left on my screen, Mr. Don Erickson, he said very correctly, the terminology of the beloved guardian is so elevated and so Oxford level, as they say, that it might be hard for the friends to know definitions. So if anyone ever has a dictionary handy or just wants to point out, hey, Ehsan, I'm not sure of this word. Let's look it up. Let's do that, okay? So always I recommend have a dictionary handy as we go through this text, because he uses a lot of words that we don't commonly use. In fact, as I was doing my audio recording, sometimes it took me 12 times. I think it was paragraph 75. I remember it's 75 because I read it like 15 times, because it was one word that my mouth wasn't even used to it. So I just kept stumbling over it. So practice yourselves as you're reading, okay? So in this section, these paragraphs, signs of convulsion, extinguishing the lights of liberty, the steady rise of discord, fanaticism, and irreligion. And lastly, he ends on a happy note, as they say. Sometimes he often does this. He is like sad, 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 then happy note. It's style of the beloved guardian. And then he talks about how great is this cause in contrast to the signs of convulsion that is happening in the world. So without any further ado, yes, Don, please.
Convulsion, an abnormal, violent, or involuntary contraction or series of contractions of the muscles.
Ah, very nice. So convulsion, it seems very organic. It's like, ugh. It's like, it seems almost like you're going to even, you know, have a state of vomit even. Am I correct, Don?
Yes.
It seems it's and imagine that in the signs of convulsion of the world. Imagine the whole world is in a state of vomit. This is a disaster that we're going through in this period of 1920s, 30s that the beloved guardian is talking about. Okay?
But in relation to what we are reading, convulsion also means a sudden, irregular, a violent social or political upheaval.
Excellent, Zamruhi-Jan. Excellent. That's absolutely right.
The guardian relates it to this matter, probably.
Right? Exactly. And so that's how beautiful. I mean, there's even that aspect that Don read, that it's almost like a vomitous, you know, physical, organic, you know, state. But absolutely, they both work in the same context. I mean, it's such a shocking state of affairs that the world is going through. So we have two readers, and I've assigned them. So without any further ado, let's get into our reading. Okay. Paragraph 10. Please.
A world torn with conflicting passions and variously disintegrating from within finds itself confronted as so crucial an epoch in its history by the rising fortunes of an infant faith, a faith that at times seems to be drawn into its controversies, entangled by its conflicts, eclipsed by its gathering shadows, and overpowered by the mounting tide of its passion. In its very heart, within its cradle, at the seat of its first and venerable temple, in one of its hitherto flourishing and potentiality powerful centers, the as yet unemancipated faith of Baha'u'llah seems indeed to have retreated before the onrushing forces of violence and disorder to which humanity is steadily falling a victim. The strongholds of such a faith, one by one and day after day, are to outward seeming being successively isolated, assaulted, and captured. As the lights of liberty flicker and go out, as the din of discord grows louder and louder every day, as the fires of fanaticism flame with increasing fierceness, in the breasts of men as the chill of irregulation creeps relentlessly over the soul of mankind. The limbs and organs that constitute the body of the faith of Baha'u'llah appear in varying measure to have become afflicted with the crippling influences that now hold in their grip the whole of the civilized world.
Excellent reading. Thank you, Saidijan. Our second reader, please.
How clearly and strikingly the following words of Abdu'l-Baha are being demonstrated at this hour. Quote, the darkness of error that has enveloped the East and the West is in this most great cycle, battling with the light of divine guidance. Its swords and its spears are very sharp and pointed, its armies keenly bloodthirsty. This day, he in another passage has written, the powers of all the leaders of religion are directed towards the dispersion of the congregation of the All-Merciful and the shattering of the divine edifice. The hosts of the world, whether material, cultural, or political, are from every side launching their assault, for the cause is great, very great. Its greatness is in this day clear and manifest to men's eyes.
Thank you very much, Beatriz. And thank you very much, Saidijan. Excellent reading, both of you. So before I go into introduction and then major key points and then going through the sections, I want to share just you with some thoughts on paragraph 10 as I was hearing it from Saidijan. If you recall, in our last part that we covered, the beloved guardian was outlining crises that were happening in different areas, such as Germany, such as Ishqabad. Do you recall this, that's in this section? And then there was the crisis that was happening in Palestine. And this was the reason that the beloved guardian himself could not be there because of the Great Revolt. So in this paragraph, he actually mentions these, but clothed in his language, as they say. So you have to look for it. So if we go into the paragraph, you could see, he says, eclipsed by its gathering shadows. Do you remember in the terminology that he talked about how Germany's was momentarily eclipsed? That was the terminology the Guardian used prior in the prior section. So he said, talking about Germany, that area was momentarily eclipsed. So again, he talks about this is eclipsed here. So he's talking about Germany during the period of the war. Then it talks about this venerable temple, the seat of its first and venerable temple in one of its hitherto flourishing and potentially powerful centers. The as yet unemancipated faith of Baha'u'llah seems indeed to have retreated before the onrushing forces of violence and disorder. So where do you think he's talking about here?
Ishqabad.
Ishqabad, of course, that great community that suddenly flourished, but suddenly it's retreating before the onrushing forces of violence and disorder and falling a victim. So here now he's talking about, this is kind of like a recap paragraph of just a few paragraphs before. So he's recapping. And he says, as the lights of liberty flicker and go out, as the din of discord grows louder and louder. This reminds me of this Persian saying, ruse ber ruse, every day. Every day is getting worse, day by day. And so he's talking about how it's getting worse every day, the increase in fierceness. and the chill of religion creeps relentlessly over the soul of mankind. And then what, so here, where do we think about liberty most? Think about the Statue of Liberty, right? It's the first thing that pops into our head when we think about liberty. And so it's now, and that our Statue of Liberty is holding a torch. Now imagine if that torch is extinguished. And this is what he's saying. As the lights of liberty flicker and go out. The din of discord. What does din mean? Our dear scholarly dictionary friend, Don Erickson, who's holding what does din mean?
Sorry, it'll take me a second.
Memorial.
Din. It's din of discord. Din, what does din mean? It's a weird strange.
Sound. A loud continued noise.
Loud continued noise. Excellent, Karen. Excellent. Loud continued noise. And it grows louder and louder every day. So this is just, in my eyes, at least, as I've been going through this with you, I see this as a recap of just the last few paragraphs that we read in our last part. And then, as we move on, now the beloved guardian is saying, how different is our Baha'i community to this? He says how clearly and strikingly the following words of Abdul Baha are being demonstrated this hour. He says the darkness of error has enveloped everywhere in this most great cycle, battling what with? The light of divine guidance. Its swords and its spears are very sharp and pointed. Its army keenly bloodthirsty. This is incredibly visual and picturesque, imagery here. He says, this day, he in another passage has written, the powers of all the leaders of religion are directed towards the dispersion of the congregation of the All-Merciful and the shattering of the divine edifice. The hosts of the world, whether material, cultural, or political, are from every side launching their assault. But last line, I love this, makes my heart to jump, but he says, for the cause is great, very great. How exciting. Raises your heart. Its greatness is in this day clear and manifest to men's eyes. So it's literally the forces of darkness allied together and trying to take out this great and nascent faith. This is a young faith fledgling. But how he says this faith is great, very great, and will overcome all these forces of darkness. That's how I see it in paragraph 11. So let's now go through a short introduction, then major points of these paragraphs, okay? Who would like to read? Just say your name and go ahead. Not everyone at once, go ahead.
The beloved guardian. The beloved guardian indicates that the crises faced by the Baha'is community at that juncture of history was foreseen by His Holiness Abdul Baha. Shoghi Effendi asserts that the reason for the assault of the religious leaders, as well as material, cultural, or political forces on the Baha'i community was the greatness of the cause, which is clear and manifest.
I find this so amazing that the entire reason all these forces are per se attacking this community is because of the greatness of this community. So this is what the beloved guardian is saying, and attributed to His Holiness Abdul Baha. He says that the reason for the assault of the religious leaders, as well as the material, the cultural, the political forces on the Baha'i community, is because of the staggering greatness of this community. So that is really awesome. That and Zamrui John, I thought I heard you say Ehsan John. So do you have a comment? You are muted.
Sorry to bother you. I was not seeing the whole screen, but I adjusted my screen, so I'm fine.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, and thank you for reading. That was excellent. Dennis, would you like to read this one?
Sure. The beloved guardian further articulates the nature of the encounter between the infant faith of Baha'u'llah and a world that is disintegrating from within. He identifies 4 signs of convulsion afflicting humanity. Quenching of lights of liberty, number 1. Number 2, increasing clamor of discord. Number 3, growing fanaticism. And number 4, relentless rise of irreligion.
So keep these in mind, okay? So these are points that as we go through more and more parts, you'll see how these play into all the different topics. The quenching of the lights of liberty, increasing clamor. Clamor is also another word for din, right? So clamor, that's constant noise, who defined it? Let me find the name. It was, I will find it. Miss Karen, yes, excellent. So Miss Karen defined it as that constant noise and this din of discord, growing fanaticism, and relentless rise of irreligion. Okay, so these are going to be kind of per se themes of these of afflictions that are happening in humanity. Okay, so these are kind of themes that we'll see over and over again. Okay, very good. Miss Donna, would you like to read?
In paragraph 10, Shoghi Effendi further expands the nature of the encounter between the infant faith of Baha'u'llah and a world that is disintegrating from within.
Now, disintegrating from within. What do you think of something disintegrating from within? It's rotting, right? It's literally rotting. So this is my apple, this demonstration here. So, and you can see a little world on it, you know, cannot be a little more apt, but that's how I think about something disintegrating from within. It's rotting, it's gone putrid, it's no good anymore. So a world that is disintegrating from within. Excellent. Donna, carry on. These are short one-liners.
The decade of the 1930s was marked by an economic collapse known as the Great Depression.
So we talked about a little bit about this horrible, catastrophic economic collapse that happened during the 20s and 30s called the Great Depression. And here's some pictures of it. And I mentioned, and in this section also, we're going to talk about Nazis. We're going to talk about the Holocaust like we did in the last section. These are topics, the Great Depression, as these are time periods that I also urge you to read and watch YouTube videos and learn more about, because this is our history. And the more that we can connect to these points of time, we learn more about, per se, the sufferings of humanity. What did they go through? And how did the Baha'i community really endure during those periods and overcome the challenges that we're going through? So this is the Great Depression. Okay, Donna, carry on.
During the 1920s and the 1930s, humanity experienced unprecedented oppression and tyranny in different parts of the world.
Excellent. Okay, let's go to Yuda Miller. Let's hear Miss Yuda. Thank you, Miss Donna.
The political systems that were designed to be democratic in this period led to fanaticism, Nazism, royal dictatorships, and other forms of authoritarian dictatorship.
Excellent reading, Miss Yuda Miller. It's, I agree, it's fanaticism, but the word here is fascism, okay? It's all fanatical and fanatic, but it's what was initially designed to be democratic suddenly became a distorted policies and ruling of fascism, Nazism, and royal dictatorships and other forms of authoritarian dictatorships. And it's not just per se in Germany. This happened all over the world. And we're going to see this in this part. How many different rulers and regions of the world started going under this extremism, fanaticism. Okay.
Hey, son.
Yes, who said
This is
Esson?
Don.
Yes, please.
I always think of fascism as simply excessive nationalism, but Webster's defined it as a political philosophy, movement, or regime that exalts nation and often race above the individual, and that stands for a centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader, severe economic and social regimentation, and forcible suppression of opposition.
Absolutely. And dear friends, we're not going to talk about any current political or any, because we stay away from partisan politics, but we're not going, but we see these extremes of fanatism in today's society all over, and as Don defined it there. So, thank you. So I will read this one to give our friends a break. This says, a review of the world history during the 1930s reveals many revolts, uprisings, and wars in different parts of the world, including South America, Europe, Middle East, Southeast Asia, and the Far East, leading eventually to the World War II. So this is in the paragraphs, the beloved Guardian, he read 5 newspapers every day. His finger was on the pulse of what exactly was going on in the world scene. And in Priceless Pearl, which I encourage you to read, and Rui Khanum said that as he was reading vociferously, I mean, really soaking in every detail of what's going on in the world, what he would do is he had all his 5 newspapers, on his desk. And I don't know how he made time for it, but he would read all these newspapers, and then he would clip out all the different important articles of what is going on in the world, and then he would stuff them into the purse of Rui Khanum. And so poor Rui Khanum had this big purse that had all the newspaper clippings of the important events of the day, and then he would use those for his letters that would go out to the world community. So amazing, truly amazing. And but in later sections we'll talk more about that, but I just wanted to share that anecdote. Okay, Farzad John, go ahead, you're up.
The early 20th century proved a period of continuous rise of irreligion driven by the atheist theories of Darwin and various ideologies and political movements inspired and driven communism and Marxism.
So this is other theories of Charles Darwin, as well as Karl Marx. These were other theories that were really continuing this rise of irreligion in humanity. So here is Charles Darwin's Origin of Species, and I'm not going to get into details of the theories of evolution in our course, but His Holiness Abdul Baha, in Some Answered Questions, and he talks about evolution in that aspect. Also, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels' Communist Manifesto, it was utilized by the Soviet Union and other countries to really put down religion. And we'll talk about that also in this part. Okay, Is Tesfaye here?
Yes, I'm here.
Please go ahead. Let's hear your beautiful voice. Go for it.
All right. In paragraph 11, the beloved guardian states that the crisis faced by the Baha'i community at that juncture of history was foreseen by His Holiness Abdul Baha.
This blows me away every time, you know, how keen the sign of God on earth. These mullahs in Iran and Middle East, they give themselves ayatollahs, but the true sign of God on earth is, you know, Hazrat of Ali Amrullah, the guardian, Shoghi Effendi, Ayatollah. He had the pulse of knowing exactly what was going on, and His Holiness Abdul Baha knew exactly and had what was going on and foresaw all these crises that were coming to be, and wrote about them in clear language. And we're going to see all of these as we go through these parts. It's very amazing at how they did this. Okay, continue, Tesfaye, please.
Okay. Abdul Baha asserts that the evident greatness of the Baha'i cause has provoked the attacks on the Baha'i community, not only by religious leaders, but also by the proponents of current material, cultural, or political views.
So this is at the close of paragraph 11, where it says Abdul Baha asserts that the evident greatness of the Baha'i cause has provoked the attacks of the Baha'i community, not only by the religious leaders, but by proponents of current, material, cultural, or political views. So it's the greatness of the cause itself has caused it to be attacked. So this is what Abdul Baha is asserting. Okay, so let's move on. So signs of convulsion, right? This is what these paragraphs are talking about, signs of convulsion. In paragraph 10, the beloved guardian further expands on the nature of the encounter between this emerging and resilient faith of Baha'u'llah and a world whose societal structures are crumbling. The guardian also describes the difficulty the Baha'i community has in resisting the negative forces generated by the failure of the old world order. I hope all of you, I have your email addresses, and I sent that picture of the crumbling and disintegration that is going on, you know, that Abdul Baha mentioned in San Francisco when he saw that columns. And that is, when I read that, I was like, wow, you know, and he's talking about how the future will be of this crumbling and disintegration of this old world order and this new world order that needs to come and take its place. And as we move on, we're going to get to entire parts called twin processes. And it's this processes of disintegration and integration. It's very exciting. I love this topic. It's first brought up in the World Order of Baha'u'llah. And in the last letter of the World Order of Baha'u'llah. So that is a topic in it for itself, and I'll talk in a different section on that. So moving on, anytime anyone has any questions or thoughts, don't hesitate. Okay, so now, signs of convulsion. Miss Mary McGregor, you're up. Go for it.
Okay. The beloved guardian refers to the effect on the Baha'i cause of the world's disintegration, an effect that becomes more and more evident as the lights of liberty flicker and go out, as the din of discord grows louder and louder every day, as the fires of fanaticism flame with increasing fierceness in the breast of men, and as the chill of irreligion creeps relentlessly over the soul of mankind.
Awesome reading, Miss Mary. It's so interesting that the words the beloved guardian uses, even when it's degeneration, she used the word disintegration, but it still makes sense in the reading here, you know? And think about how this world is, as she says, disintegrating. It's just falling apart everywhere. And it's just breaking down, degenerating. The lights of liberty flicker and go out. The din of discord grows louder and louder. Fires of fanaticism. War, chaos. In our last part, the words going together was chaos and confusion. Chill of irreligion. And we're going to see this chill of irreligion as in this time period of what the beloved guardian is talking about. The Baha'i community has been drawn into the controversies of the old world order. So this is the Baha'i community he's talking about. The Baha'i community has been drawn into the controversies of the old world, entrapped in its conflicts, overshadowed by the darkness surrounding it, overcome by its increasing passion. Amazing. Terrible. So this world encircling cloud of blackness is coming around the Baha'i community, and we're getting drawn into these controversies. And we see this often, sometimes even on social spaces. Baha'is might share their viewpoints, even on political, or get entrapped in these kind of controversies that we shouldn't be getting into. Am I right or am I right? That was a rhetorical question. But yes, this happens. We get entrapped in it, and it's because it's so pervasive. And we have to be on the guard. We have to stay focused, and we have to know what our mission is. And we have to arise and go after it, as they say. And and I hope as we go through this course that you get ever more inspired, get more ever excited, and more impassioned to serve and teach in your communities. Okay, let's go to Simin John. You have the floor.
The catastrophic phenomena Shoghi Effendi is describing in this paragraph were driven by a succession of events and processes that started, strengthened, or eliminated after World War I, during the 1920s and the 1930s. In particular, the decade of 1930s was marked by an economic collapse known as the Great Depression that followed the Wall Street crash of late October 1929. The crash led to widespread unemployment and worldwide poverty.
So it wasn't just America that, suffered economically. It was worldwide poverty because of this Great Depression. As mentioned in last part, it was that people lost faith in the banks. So they stopped, going to the banks. They stopped shopping. They just like, if you lose, so they just kept hoarding their money. So they stopped shopping. And so what happened? The entire economy went into a massive depression, and everything, and as they say, went to hell, as they said. It was terrible, absolutely terrible during the Great Depression. So political aftermath. There were also major political aftermaths, such as the emergence of authoritarian regimes in a number of countries in Europe, as well as South America. the invasion of weak countries, such as Ethiopia, China, and Poland. Interestingly, China at that time was considered weak, you know, but yes, they were considered weak. Ethiopia and Poland were also, at that point in time, were also weak countries by imperialist world powers and the breakout of World War II just before the end of the decade. And so here you can see some headlines. And this is, this is the invasion of Ethiopia. It says, Italian planes spread death in sudden attack. 2 towns in Ethiopia are bombed. So Italy suddenly attacked Ethiopia, and it was quite an atrocity. And this is the sudden attack by the Japanese on China. And this was an incredible, I hope there's a book called The Rape of Nan King. This was that is an incredible book in itself, and of the atrocities that the Japanese did in when they attacked China. So urge you to also to watch YouTube videos on these history of these atrocities. So during the light, yes, who's talking? I
have heard that more Chinese were killed by the Japanese than died in the death camps in Germany. I don't know if that's true or not.
It's a good thing to look up, Don. That's your homework. Check it out, you know? So yes, it's quite possible. I mean, the Japanese were extremely, extremely brutal. They employed a strategy of terrorism in their warfare. Of how they did it was they would rape the women and dehumanize the population, in the sense by raping all the women in the villages and forcing all the men into a complete sense of servility. I mean, they were being very servile. They would strip them of all clothes and everything, and then if they kept them alive, if they did, they were in a sense of forced labor. And even though the Chinese far outnumbered the Japanese during the war, it was just, they were a much weaker country and not a warring country like Japan was. But very good point, Don. Excellent. But look into it. Yes, there were the atrocities of Japan was quite horrendous. And so moving on, dousing the lights of liberty. During the 1920s and the 30s, humanity experienced unprecedented oppression and tyranny in different parts of the world. People lost their freedom and liberty as the result of authoritarian regimes that emerged in many countries simultaneously. So here I've defined freedom and I've defined liberty, because this is the words of the beloved guardian. It says, dousing the lights of liberty, and freedom and liberty. So what is freedom? It usually means to free from something. And liberty means to be free to do something. So it's a little different, but it's this dousing. Dousing means what? It means to be putting it out, extinguishing the flame of. And so this is what is been going on during this period of time. So let us have a reader. This is a quote from His Holiness Shoghi Effendi. Miss Roya John, would you like to read this?
Okay. Forces of darkness. We have but to turn our eyes to the world without to realize the fierceness and the magnitude of the forces of darkness that are struggling with the dawning light of the Abha revelation. Nations, though exhausted and disillusioned, have seemingly begun to cherish anew the spirit of revenge, of domination and strife. peoples convulsed by economic upheavals are slowly drifting into two great opposing camps with all their menace of social chaos, class hatreds, and worldwide ruin. Races, alienated more than ever before, are filled with mistrust, humiliation, and fear, and seem to prepare themselves for a fresh and fateful encounter. Creeds and religions, caught in this whirlpool of conflict and passion, appear to gaze with impotence and despair at this spectacle of unceasing turmoil.
Excellent. Very well read, Roy John.
Thank you.
Forces of darkness. The words of the beloved guardian. Fierce. And this magnitudes. And this poor struggling light of the Abha revelation just trying to emerge into the world. This amazing forces of darkness rushing, attacking. And what is it doing? It says nations are exhausted and disillusioned. It's the spirit of revenge everywhere, dominating, strife, and peoples convulsed. Do you remember we talked about this convulsion, convulsed by economic upheavals? We talked about this economic crash, economic upheavals are happening, slowly drifting into two great opposing camps. And what are these opposing camps? It's this war that's going on. It's this the aspects of the Allies and the aspects of the Axis powers, two forces that are literally opposing each other. So the Guardian's even foreseeing this. He's saying two great opposing camps with all their menace of social chaos, class hatreds, and worldwide ruin. This is amazing. Here he says races. Now he's talking about the aspect of racism that's going on. He says races alienated more than ever before. It's getting worse. He says this aspect of racism is getting worse than ever before. And people are filled with mistrust, humiliation, and fear, and seem to prepare themselves for a fresh and fateful encounter. What does that mean? Fateful encounter means probably they're going to have a conflict. There's going to be blood in our streets, as foretold by Abdul Baha. Fateful encounter. Creeds and religions caught in this whirlpool of conflict and passion appear to gaze with impotence and despair at the spectacle of unceasing turmoil. So what does this mean? Creeds and religions. Creeds are these ideologies, such as the ones that espouse that we talked about, Marxism and these other ideologies. They're impotent. They don't know what to do. They have no idea what is the solution to this whirlpool of conflict, of passion that is happening around the world. It's just day by day getting worse. So this is the beloved guardian talking this, as he's surveying the scenery of this conflict and conflagration. Here's a quote from the beloved guardian. Who's is that Tesfaya?
Huh?
Who talked? Someone said something.
No, not me.
Okay. Did someone say Ehsan? Nope. Guess not. I am hearing things. Okay.
This is Don.
Oh, please, Don.
Don
Erickson. Yes, go for it, Don.
The estimates of war dead in China are 3 to 10 million, but the Japan Times says an estimated 14 to 20 million Chinese were.
Wow. 14 to 20 million people. Oh, wow. That's what I say.
My internet connection is unstable. Can you?
Yes, I can hear you. I hear you, but your camera is not visible.
Can you hear me?
There you go. You're back. But yes, unbelievable. So, as I said earlier, read, just like as Don read, read these, what's going on. Find out, read and learn. Watch these history things on YouTube. You know, that's what I do too. When I get tired of reading, I watch these history things on YouTube and to enrich your knowledge and of what's been going on. Okay? The chief reason for the evils now rampant in society is the lack of spirituality. Bullet point this. This is one of the most, as they say, themes of the advent of divine justice. The chief reason, number one reason of all the problems that's going on in society is lack of spirituality. Why do you think, the first book of our great, institute process is Reflections on the Life of the Spirit? Because humanity is lacking this. It's lacking this. This is the first thing that the House of Justice says, put it in the course. The chief evil is lack of spirituality.
That is true.
Thank you for confirming that, Tesfaye.
Yeah, because, when we are mature, we are going to do mature actions so that society is going to get better and our spiritual level is going to be increased layer by layer and layer by layer.
Very well put. Very well put. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is how I see it. Forces of darkness. It's, as they said, it was disintegrating, degenerating. The terminology was saying eating it from within. As I showed you that apple, it's literally destroying the beautifulness, the vibrancy of our planet. Environmentally, there's a million other problems that are going on with the excesses of materialism and greed that we'll be going into. But these are the forces of darkness. So I'm going to read this one, and then I'm also going to mention this individual in the bottom right that some of you may recognize. It says, it was generally believed that after the bloody events of World War I, humanity was determined to build a peaceful world, and the formation of the League of Nations was a strong indication of such a hope. Such expectations started to develop even during World War I. President Woodrow Wilson, the 19th President of the United States, interesting, he was the 19th. The 19th, as you know, Baha'is, is a Vahed, significant, but and also the beloved guardian in the end, which in part 24, I'm going to come to it, he has the highest station of all presidents. So we're going to get to that later. You would have never thought that this president here, Woodrow Wilson, was the greatest of all presidents, but the beloved guardian affirms it. So Woodrow Wilson, the 19th President of the United States, asked the Congress to enter World War I by stating, the world must be made safe for democracy. World War I was also seen as a war to end all wars. Very common phrase, we hear this all the time, war to end all wars. History has shown that those assumptions were, what? False. And the political systems that were designed to be democratic in the 1920s and the 1930s led to all these terrible things that we talked about. Fascism, Nazism, these royal dictatorships and other forms of autocracy. So it's royal dictatorships. See, there's nothing wrong with royalty. As Baha'is, we actually love royalty. There's actually tablets of His Holiness Baha'u'llah praising the aspect of royalty, but it's royal dictatorships that is the problem here. So, okay, and there is a great Mr. Woodrow Wilson, President Woodrow Wilson, that we're going to talk much later in part 24. He's called the unappreciated president, unappreciated. So that's what the beloved guardian terms him, that his station is so lofty that he actually, I believe it's paragraph 119 off the top of my head, where he states, the beloved guardian states in unequivocal language at the end of that paragraph that this President Woodrow Wilson, the 19th president, is bringing about the dawning of the most great peace. Incredible, incredible. So what a station that this president has. And I was thinking, you know, we've had some great presidents, right? Who would you think is a great president? You know, President Lincoln, right? Freed all the slaves, you know, millions of slaves. But we'll also talk about him in a later section of what he did and all the other things. But the station of President Woodrow Wilson far excels. So, excellent. Moving on. World War I was formally ended when the peace treaty known as the Treaty of Versailles was signed by the Allies on the 28th of June, 1919, without the participation of Germany. The Allies included Britain, France, Russia, Italy, and the United States, who fought against the Central Powers that consisted of Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria. There were many provisions in this treaty, but the most important, this is what I want you to focus on, the most important and controversial of them deemed Germany as the aggressor in the war and required Germany to accept the full responsibility of the war, of having caused all the losses and all the damages that incurred during the war. Poor Germany. It wasn't just Germany's fault. There was other countries that were bad, but Germany had to pay the full price according to this Treaty of Versailles. The treaty compelled reparations. This treaty was put together by the Allies to prevent another war. But what happened? However, its controversial articles and treatment of Germany fueled the emergence of another world war. So we think of the principle in the faith of equity, justice, fairness. And how would you resolve, you know, just thinking of how would you resolve, you know, after such a devastating war, a treaty to bring Germany, bring Austria-Hungary, bring the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria to the table? How would you draft something like that? Would you put it, hey, it was complete your fault, pay all the reparations and end it? Dr. Beit.
Essenjan, that's very true. Germany didn't start the war. It went in support of Austria-Hungary.
Exactly.
In that, and of course, ended up as the bigger power, taking all the losses. But it's interesting that the world learned from that mistake of Versailles. And as a result of that, after Second World War, the Marshall Plan was put together that Germany, part of France, part of Britain, and Japan were reconstructed by the Allies. And as a result, and also no military was placed on them. At their own invitation, US military stayed in these countries. But that was something valuable lesson that the world learned from the Versailles Treaty. Thank you.
Excellent point. Thank you, Dr. Beit. So you could see like how we are like schoolyard children, you know, as a humanity.
Essenjan, I think Bruce has a comment.
Oh, please, Bruce, don't hesitate. Just jump in, because sometimes I don't see everyone's face on the screen.
I think we need to make 2 points.
Go for it, Bruce.
You know, one is about Woodrow Wilson, and you once say Chogi Effendi said he was a great president.
Yes.
But you didn't say why, you know, exactly and specifically why.
I'm not there yet, Bruce. It will come later. But please, if you want to, go ahead.
No, but you know, you said that, and obviously that's true because you referenced it, you know. But one other point you have to, you know, is what he did, not who he was.
Exactly.
Because, okay, so I'll leave that so you can explain that later.
Perfect point, Bruce.
The other point I would like to make is he just said that the Allied forces, or mainly the U.S., did not treat the vanquish of World War II as what happened after World War I. Earlier in the stuff we've gone through, you've suggested that what Chogi Effendi cited, what was occurring in the world was this dying of the old world order in some sense, and that there was a rise of vengeance. And so the Treaty of Versailles was basically revenge upon Germany and that group. It was a peace for a time, but it did not get at the core causes of the war.
Exactly.
The same is true after World War II. The difference that we're not seeing the subtlety in is this. Granted, there was the Marshall Plan, and the Allies agreed to rebuild the vanquished countries. But what they did in the United States was the primary architect of that was Germany and Japan and Italy and Europe had to take on debt. The United States said, we will rebuild your countries and you will pay us back. And the people you're going to use to rebuild your countries are American contractors. And so the wealth you see in the United States after World War II that did not exist before World War II was due to the Marshall Plan. So basically, we did was the same thing to the Germans that was done to the Germans after World War I. We simply said, though, because we have a common enemy who are the Russians, we will protect you. And so again, we have had to the date a reasonable peace for 75 years. And we in the United States have assumed that we've done great, wonderful things for the world. But as you can see what's happening in the country today, is you see fanaticism, you see nationalism, you see fascism. And over the last 4 years, there's a great deal of that kind of disruption in the world. So so the greatness that Americans like to feel about what they did at the end of the war was really no different. It just haven't had a long enough time for the world to say, wait a minute, we did not improve the station of mankind. We did institute the United Nations or help support it or bring it about, but we basically have said, we have the right, we and 3 or 4 other countries have the right to vote against everything the world may want. You see what I mean? We have a veto power, which makes that institution unable to function, just like with the League of Nations under Wilson. So
excellent points. Excellent points, Bruce. Very well taken.
I'm sorry if I got too excited.
No, this is exciting stuff. History is exciting. If you can't get excited about history, what can you get excited about? We should soak this up. Okay, moving on. So, a German Workers' Party was formed in that year, okay? And in this year, it was founded, and its agenda was to abandon this Treaty of Versailles, because we talked about it, because they were putting all the blame on Germany. So this German Workers' Party was formed and founded. Extreme nationalism. So later this party changed its name to what? Nationalist Socialist German Workers, Nazi Party. And Adolf Hitler was an army veteran, and he was unhappy with the defeat of Germany in World War I, so he joined this party in 1921. Through his charismatic speeches, Adolf Hitler soon became a prominent figure in this movement. He blamed the Jews and the Marxists for Germany's problems and promoted the idea that Germans were pure descendants of the ancient Aryan race, which they considered to be a superior or master race. Hitler's views attracted much attention, and he became the leader of the party in July of 1921. And here you can see some pictures I put. That is the logo of the German Workers' Party on the top. And that is Adolf Hitler's DAP card, Deutsche Arbeiterpartie. Miss Yuda Miller can probably say it far better than I can. You want to go for it, Miss Yuda Miller, just so I can hear the German pronunciation? You're muted, Miss Yuda Miller. You're muted.
Okay. Deutsche Arbeiterpartei.
There you go. I'm so happy to have you for all of these parts that we have in German. So there it is. That's his Adolf Hitler's DAP card and his membership number. So that was, and here's a picture of young Adolf Hitler, a member of the German Workers' Party in German Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, or I'm just going to stick with DAP. There you go. And he was a member of the political party founded in Munich. And you can see I've put the line right on him. So yes, he was very much active. And so this started the rise of Nazism. Germany entered an economic depression in 1929. This is during this period of the Great Depression, 1929. So, and also with this penalties, the reparations of the First World War, it was just in massive economic shock during this period. The Nazis exploited this situation and criticized the government in power. So in what happened? Eventually in 1933, Hitler became the German Chancellor. And you can see the picture to the right. That's where he was receiving the title of becoming the German Chancellor of. And through his strict dictatorship, all other political parties in the country were banned. He literally quickly took over, and that's what he did. He banned any other political groups, any other factions. He quickly banned them, and he became a dictator immediately. And this gave him complete control over every aspect of life in Germany, and gave Hitler and his party the opportunity to do what? Systematically pursue his ideologies of persecution and eradication of the Jews and any other minority. And so this is what happened, as well as halting the spread of communism. That was another major one of his ideals. So this agenda was significant contribution to the start of World War II. And in the bottom picture, you could see this is the largest synagogue. And they burned it. And we're going to get into this section of a period called Kristallnacht. Does anyone know what that means, or has an idea of what Kristallnacht is?
Oh,
Yes.
I know. They shattered the windows on the shops. There was glass all over.
2 points for Yuda Miller. Excellent. Very good. And I think Patrick knew that one too, right?
Well, sure. We seem to be really zeroing in on the Nazis and on the case of Germany. It is worthwhile at this time, and I know you're probably going to get to this, to understand that Germany is the exemplar of these dictatorships across Europe. By this time, of course, Lenin was dead, the pretenders were gone, Stalin was consolidating power, Franco was rising to power in Spain, Mussolini in Italy, there was a dictatorship in Hungary, there was a fascist party openly agitating for control in Great Britain. And at the same time, all of these nations, convulsed as they were also trying to hold on their weakening grip to their colonies across Asia and Africa. So it truly was a maelstrom. And as we kind of delve into the rise of Nazism, we end up finding these particular racial theories that might not have gained a foothold, but they succeeded in the most literate and most advanced of all the nations of Europe.
Excellent point, Patrick. Absolutely spot on. The reason I'm focusing on Nazism as such is because the beloved guardian, mentions it, in the aspect of Germany and also an aspect of also how much it impacted the global environment. That what they did was, and the atrocities that they brought. And also it's interesting in that video that I sent of that professor when he was talking about Nazism, and he was saying that it is the complete contrast, diametrically opposed to the standard of the faith, and that I find that amazing, that this is the rise of everything opposed to what the standard of Baha'u'llah is. So excellent points, Patrick, really appreciate it. And as to his points, there was many other dictators, many other tyrants, many other that I'm not going to get into in as detailed as Nazism. But yes, I am going to get into a few others. But yes, he's spot on. There's, and I encourage every one of you to go through this period of history and delve into it, because this is something so rich, so filled with episodes of turmoil, what is going on. Oh, if I missed anyone raising their hand, Bruce, did you raise your hand? I apologize.
Yes, I just want to say I'd like to just add one thing, and that is this. We need to think about, I think we need to think about, most of the people in those countries were not, most people in Germany were not Nazis per se, in the sense of saying they believe in the total and complete doctrine of the Nazis, of Hitler. Basically what you have in Italy, in Germany, in Spain, in the other countries he mentions were fascist states that basically said, we have a dictator, we have a strong, not a dictator, we have a strong man who runs the country, and he has a group or a layer of people between him and the rest of the people who are not, direct members that he believes and have confidence in. So you have a Nazi party who said, if you believe in the Aryan nation, then you are part of those who are in the in group, and everybody else is in the out group. And our target for that, for crystallizing that society are the Jews. But we have to accept the following premise, and that is the people were being starved by the Treaty of Versailles.
Exactly.
And so, as Shoghi Effendi is describing, the people are suffering. The people are suffering in Italy. The people are suffering in Spain.
Right.
And so the strong men in those countries say, let's pick a group that we're going to say we're not them, and we're going to use them to bring us to power. And so, the only point I'm trying to make by this is we need to keep in our minds that the people themselves were not necessarily true believers,
right,
in the parties that ran their country.
Sure.
But I might refer you to something that Baha'u'llah said, when you think that those are bad governing models.
Right. Excellent.
Government, any government is better than no government.
Sometimes
so if you look at how the Baha'is were treated in Iran, why did he not allow the Baha'is to fight back,
right,
to carry weapons? He disallowed it because government of any kind is better than lawlessness.
Sure. Excellent point. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you. So moving on, so this is the point that I was getting into. Kristallnacht, the violent night of the broken glass. And here you can see this is a period it was November 1938. So now Hitler is really moving on his campaign of eradication, his final solution. But first he has to go through humiliation and ghettoization of the Jewish population. So Here's Jewish women in Linz, Austria, and they're exhibiting in a public with a cardboard sign stating that I have been excluded from the national community during the anti-Jewish pogrom. So it's public humiliation, isolation, and so that they are dehumanized. This is part of the dehumanization process that was going on. Germans passed by smashed windows. This is during this night of catastrophe, really. Kristallnacht, the German anti-Semitic pogrom. Over 200 synagogues destroyed, thousands of Jewish homes, businesses ransacked. Years in the more, 7,500 Jewish businesses vandalized, looted. So this was a nationalized, organized, systematic campaign to terrorize the Jewish population. And this was this night of the broken glass. 267 synagogues, all their places of worship destroyed. What did they do? Community burnings of Jewish books, furniture, ritual objects, public burnings. Imagine this. This is recent history. This is modern day burnings of books, sacred ritual objects. This is one of the largest synagogues ever. This synagogue, which is bearing a sign that says reading, Germans do not buy from Jews. That's what it says. And it was burned. And you can, this is what happened. It was burned. In this November 1938 file photo, the firefighters, you can see them at the bottom. They're walking next to the synagogue, but they're not putting out the fire. Berlin's biggest house of Jewish worship after Nazis set fire to it in a series of anti-Jewish attacks throughout Germany and Austria on November 9th, 1930. They were instructed, the firefighters as well as the police, not to do anything, according to German Chancellor Adolf Hitler. Group of people standing outside a Jewish-owned shop in an unnamed German town. You can see, destroyed, ransacked. I could go 1,000 more pictures, going into that. But I as dear Dennis McGregor said, this is just one instance, one uprising, one tyrant, one terrorist, in the sense of this was happening all over the place in the sense of terrorism to humanity during this period. Here it is in Italy. We can move to Italy now. Let's have someone read this. How about Dr. Bayat? Would you like to read this? Go for it. You're muted.
I'll be happy to.
Thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you. Rise of the National Fascist Party. In Italy, another World War I veteran, Benito Mussolini, after being discharged from the army in 1917, established the National Fascist Party in collaboration with Italian socialists and nationalists. In October 1922, Mussolini and his fascist party marched on Rome. King Victor Emmanuel III asked him to form a new government and appointed him as the prime minister. Initially, he collaborated with the parliament, but eventually he effectively became a dictator. In January 1925, Italy was declared a fascist with Mussolini as the leader. In 1935, Mussolini's army invaded and annexed Ethiopia, that you referred to it earlier on.
Yes, correct. Thank you, Dr. Bat. Yes. So here is the emblem of the National Fascist Party, and we can see here Benito Mussolini's Roman salute. This is when he marched on Rome. Yes. And then on 17th of July, 1936, Mussolini joined Adolf Hitler in support of Francisco Franco's nationalist force in the Spanish Civil War against a left-wing Republican faction backed by the Soviet Union and international communist parties. So both of them allied together against communist parties. Franco's national forces were defeated the Republican forces in April of 1939. Consequently, Franco became the head of state of Spain, forming another authoritarian dictatorship. So, yep, another one formed there. So this was just the rise of dictatorships, one after another. Now we move to Soviet Union. Anyone recognize this guy? This is Joseph Stalin. He really wanted to compete of how many people he killed. You know, was it the China, you know, the Japanese? This is how it was back then. How many more people can I kill? So in the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin came to power after the death of Lenin in the mid-1920s. He was committed to Marxist-Leninism and established a totalitarian regime. That's a hard word to pronounce. Totalitarian regime based on this ideology. In 1934, he started purging the leaders inside and outside the Communist Party. And I've seen pictures of this. This is a crazy thing. You see in the top picture, that's his picture of him just going and killing everyone that was opposed to him. All those people, anyone opposed to him, sent to Siberia, you know, bullet in the back of the head. He was brutal, absolutely brutal. And this BIOS, this is a website done by the Russians after. It tells you in detail what happened to each one of those figures that were inside and outside the Communist Party. This period is known as the Great Purge in the Soviet Union, as many people were arbitrarily arrested and sent to labor camps or executed. And they've even nowadays found mass graves of this Great Purge. And you can see a bottom picture. This is a mass grave, just bodies strewn all over it. This guy truly competed at number of people killed. He is a very low place in the sense of hell. That's putting it lightly. So moving on, each one of these cases I could go into far greater detail, but I just want to give you snapshots as the beloved guardian was doing it in ending, right? So now we go to when he mentions South America. So what happened in South America? Another dictatorship was established, and this is in Brazil by Getulio Darnell Vargas. My Spanish is not very good. In 1937, Vargas served as the president of Brazil for 2 terms from 1930 to 1937, according to the Constitution. He had to step down as a president after 2 terms. Using fears of a communist revolution as an excuse, what did he do? He announced on the radio on 10th of November, 1937, that he was seizing emergency powers. He dissolved the Congress, canceled the election planned for 1938, and he also changes the Constitution to secure absolute power in the authoritarian new state corporatist regime. And he stayed in power until 1945.
Oh my God.
Yes, crazy, incredible. This is a guy that a lot of people don't know about, you know, this Getulio Darnell Vargas, but he pretty much completely took hold of Brazil and made it a totalitarian regime, dissolved Congress, canceled the election, changed the Constitution, and he killed a bunch of other people that I didn't get into, but that's what he did, yeah, to create his regime.
Very notorious.
Yeah. So growing discord, fanaticism, irreligion. We've talked about these things that are going on during this period of time. And this is, I've just given you just touch on a few instances during this world history, per se, lesson. During this 1930s, there were many revolts, uprisings, wars, different parts of the globe, South America, Europe, Middle East, Southeast Asia, Far East. And they were all leading eventually to this catastrophe, World War II. And this League of Nations that was formed to prevent this another war. But what happened? It lost its credibility because they put all the reparations on just this one country, Germany, lost its credibility. And so other countries such as Germany, Kingdom of Italy, Empire of Japan, they pulled out of it. So that was kind of a synopsis paragraph I put in there. Japan, another country. Japan, it invaded Manchuria. So let's have someone else read. People are getting tired of Ehsan's voice right now.
It's fair to say that although the formation of League of Nations was recommended by American president after First World War, but nevertheless, United States Congress did not approve the American joining that League of Nations, and as a result, it never had enough power, and as a result of power struggle, it was discredited and eventually did not achieve any good purpose. Thank you.
Excellent.
Also, just a comment, also I found in reading some historical articles in the Atlantic that on the League of Nations and the Axis powers, it said that Germany, Italy, and Japan were also testing the newly founded League of Nations with multiple invasions and occupations of nearby countries, and they were emboldened when they encountered what they considered to be no meaningful consequences, and things continued to rise.
Perfect point, Karen. Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Bayat. Thank you, Karen. Great points. Also, I'm going to send you an article. You can find it yourselves. It's on Baha'i Library, the connection of Woodrow Wilson to the Baha'i faith. It's very interesting. It's on Baha'i Library. I'll send it forthcoming tomorrow. But it shows. Some people have thought maybe his daughter was a Baha'i. That's not true. She wasn't a Baha'i, but she was investigating religions. And there was 4 Baha'i books in the library of Woodrow Wilson. And so he was very much inspired by the Baha'i faith. And so I'll send you that article. It's on the Baha'i Library. Please, Bruce, you have your hand. Go for it. You are muted, Bruce.
We have a speaker.
I said I would also say he was a member of the Ku Klux Klan.
I never said he was a great guy.
But I don't want anyone to get the impression that he was important to the faith because he was a wonderful guy. He was important to the faith because he brought into being the League of Nations.
That's the spot on. Yeah.
And the problem with the League of Nations, I don't know about the League of Nations in particular, but the problem with the UN and why it's ineffective today and why it was ineffective at its beginning is because none of its members would subordinate their sovereignty to the decisions of the UN. And that's why it didn't work in the beginning, it doesn't work now. And like in the Congress is a group saying the US Constitution will not allow us, or we will not, because of our sovereignty, subordinate it to a body that doesn't represent our people exclusively. And so all the other nations,
America First ideology that was really isolationism, America First. You're spot on, Bruce. Absolutely spot on. Great point. And as Bruce mentioned, yes, he was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And so it's not that he per se was a great individual. It's what he did, okay? That I really want you to remember, okay? Thank you very much, Bruce. Great points.
I think as a president of Conference for Peace, He's the one who invited Abdul Baha to come to America to give a talk in that conference. And as you said, he was inspired from what he heard from Abdul Baha and the Baha'i faith. But naturally, he's the one who proposed the League of Nations. But as our friends said, dedication to an idea is needed. Otherwise, just to pay lip service to an idea, it would never make it fruitful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Ehsan.
Please, Tesfaya, please.
Yeah, the way I see now here, because fascism is spreading all over the Europe and still in Brazil too. But on the other side of the world is to be our spiritual general. That means the guardian is building and then making the Baha'i world to be much better.
Right.
Between this crisis and everything. But in these present days, how is these countries activities, the Baha'i things, is there any information you have?
So great question. So as you will see in these paragraphs, and also I'll address your question, the beloved guardian, how he's writing, he puts crisis, then victory, crisis and victory. And the victory he's demonstrating is the contrast is the Baha'i community. So he's showing how this degenerating, disintegrating old world order that is happening. And then he puts the Baha'i community, in the American Baha'i community, who's addressing this letter. In the next paragraphs, he'll address them. And then in the coming paragraphs, he'll say how to build up this American Baha'i community through these three weapons, and then fight these long-standing evils, and then go into this double crusade of fighting these long-standing evils within your community, and then transforming the community at large. But he's really contrasting what's going on in the world to what's going on. As to your question directly, I would say the House of Justice has written, per se, a book, and that book is Century of Light. And in Century of Light, they have gone back and recapped, from the period of, from the beloved guardian, he did 100 years from 1844 to 1944, and Century of Light, they have done a survey of the history of the cause, as well as the turmoils. And also the House of Justice goes into great details of other events and oppressions in Century of Light. So as to your question, Tesfaya, yes, there's many other episodes that are going on, even currently. So this is another per se crazy tyrant that was going on in that period of time, that was just mad with power, and creating such chaos and inhumanity. And this is in China. A civil war for the control of the nation broke out in 1927 between the ruling Kuomintang and the rebel Communist Party of China. And what happened is, in the early 1930s, the communists announced a Chinese Soviet Republic. So because of this per se civil war that was going on, it really weakened China. It was already relatively weak, but this civil war even weakened it more. But what happened was this republic did not last long and collapsed following Kuomintang's attacks, resulting in a mass retreat by the communists, led by Mao Zedong. And this was known as the Long March. I'm sure many of our great historians in our group, Patrick, you're a professor of history, right? Am I correct in this?
Yes.
Yes.
Wait, I'm hang on, I'm trapped out of my Zoom.
Oh no. You were frozen, Patrick. Frozen in time on our Zoom.
Let me get him on my computer so he
There
can
you go. There you go.
Here, give me these. Just,
Okay. There you go. It's kind of eerie to see two Patricks on my screen right now, but it's in, there you go. Please go for it.
Oh, to read this.
Yeah. I don't know. Okay.
In China, civil war for the control of the nation broke out in 1927 between the ruling Kuomintang and the rebel Communist Party of China. In the early 1930s, the communists announced a Chinese Soviet Republic. However, the republic did not last long and collapsed following Kuomintang attacks, resulting in a mass retreat by the communists led by Mao Zedong, known as the Long March. In 1931, the Empire of Japan invaded and captured Manchuria. It established the puppet state of Manchukuo to control that region, managed by a puppet government headed by Puyi, the last Qing dynasty emperor of China.
Very well read. Hard names to pronounce. So this is another episode of these tyrants that was going on during that period. So this is this long march. It began at 5 o'clock on October 16th, 1934. And just like the Germans, the Japanese liked to record details, you know, of their atrocities. So they knew exactly when this march started, 5 p.m., October 16th, 1934. Secrecy and rearguard actions confused the nationalists, and it was several weeks before they realized that the main body of the Red Army had fled. The retreating force initially consisted of 86,000 troops, 15,000 personnel, and 35 women. The communist marchers crossed 24 rivers, 18 mountain ranges, mostly snow-capped. So out of 86,000 troops, 15,000 personnel, and 35 women, only 4,000 people came out.
Yeah.
That's more than 96,000 people died walking across it. What an atrocity. I mean, what a way to die. Just walk yourself to death. It's incredible.
Terrible one.
So we're getting to our close. So the 1930s also witnessed this growth of fanaticism, fundamentalism, manifesting the extreme political, racial, religious, nationalistic biases, prejudices. This long period of economic hardship, anxiety, this period known as the Great Depression, all building up fanaticism, radical regimes. The Great Depression also in the United States affected every group of society, but this is a very important point. It affected African Americans more than anyone else, any other group. Because prior to the Great Depression, what was it? It was pretty much civil war, then slavery. So they were just a stone's breath out of slavery. And then they're going into this Great Depression. And who do you think they're going to help? You think they're going to go help the African Americans? No, they're thinking of themselves. So they let the African Americans go into mass poverty. And this is really another sense of another layer of systematized racism that was prevalent at that point. And still is, it still is. This hasn't changed, but it was exacerbated by the Great Depression. By 1932, nearly half of the African Americans had lost their jobs to whites. Racial violence also became more widespread, particularly in the southern states. And I've seen videos, and I encourage you to continue to studying, and I'm going to share more whatever I learn. I saw videos of instances where an African American had a job during this period, and the whites did not have a job. So what did he do? They went and killed the African American, took the job. This is prevalent This was going on widespread. This was during this period. And there's things I cannot include per se because it's so hard to put pictures, terminology, especially in the sections on race. It's so powerful. The pictures, the atrocities. I saw a picture of a card, and I shared this with my dad, Dr. Bayat. He's, at least to me, down below me, but in my pictures. But I saw a picture of this card and this card, what they would do is, it was a card that, just like your ID card, your driver's license card, this was called, and forgive my language, it was called a nigger license card. This is what they would do. They would go and hunt African Americans. It was sanctioned by the government, and it was sanctioned by to go and do that. This was the same period right here. It wasn't 20 years ago or prior. It was this period, and this is recent history, friends. This is not 100, 200 years ago. This is our American history that I mean, I live in Houston, Texas, and even 30 years ago, an African American was lynched in our city from a light pole here. So 30 years ago. I mean, it's so recent. I mean, and even 4 weeks ago, 2 African Americans were lynched. That was during the period of George Floyd. They were trying to, say, forget George Floyd. We're just going to go lynch African Americans. It was just 4 weeks ago. They lynched 2 African Americans in Houston. So nothing really has changed. It's still here. Racism is so prevalent. We're going to get into it far more great detail. The final solution was going on during this time too. This, I could talk at great detail on it, but my words would not do any justice. It just gives me tears, heartache, and I sleepless nights. But I encourage you to study this. When dear Don Erickson asked me on email, he said, Ehsan, what can I study on, when last time session, he said, study the Holocaust. I say, read everything. Study these atrocities, dear friends. It makes your hearts tender. You get to learn what the inhumanity has been going on. Read, study, watch videos, learn. It's so terrible what has happened in this. Oh, and here's to a point of last session that dear Miss Yuda Miller was reading these beautiful accounts from His Holiness Abdul Baha regarding Germany. I wanted to share this thought also. The more I studied about the atrocities of Germany, the more I got upset with Germany, per se, It's kind of natural. The more you study about African-American racism and the, atrocities against African-Americans, you start getting, all whites do everything, all the problems. So it becomes a level of bias. You start getting angry against the other one. It's humane, it's human to do this. Right? So the more I studied about the atrocities of the Germans, I was like, my God, the Germans are just, what did they do? But then to counter that, how do you counter this? You have to delve into what does Abdul Baha, what does the beloved guardian say about these people? The Germans. The German people, as I believe it was Patrick or Bruce, said that, sure, it was really the rulers that were orchestrating this horrendous violence and chaos that was going on. The vast majority of the people, per se, were sheep, in this manipulation that was going on, to put it lightly. I don't want to call them sheep, but that's really, they were just pawns and being moved by these fingers of power. And when I read those quotes in our last part from His Holiness Abdul Baha regarding Germany, it uplifted my heart and really crushed any aspect of, prejudice per se against Germany. And I hope as we get into the sections on race and the sections on that these love, the true burning love that the master, his holiness, the beloved guardian, have towards the people of the pupil of the eye, that any trace of prejudice gets eradicated, uprooted is the word the beloved guardian uses, uprooted, weeded out, so that our love for them becomes ever stronger, burns, you know? So it has to be tangible, as they say. So this is something that, thoughts, I'm sharing my thoughts, because, you know, we all have prejudices. And, you know, the more I studied I grew up in Scotland, England, a country that has suffered at the hands of Germany, bombings. And in my schooling period, the teachers taught such a vicious prejudice against Germany. I mean, it was very prevalent. They said the German people are the cause of mass death. And so this is what I grew up with. I learned this. And so whenever I even the term German came into my thought, it was associated with Nazi. It was they went hand in hand, you know? So I had to, per se, unlearn this through the words of Abdu'l-Baha. You see what I'm saying? So this is something that we have to work on ourselves. We have to know thyself, bring thyself to account. Where is your, per se, what is your prejudice? We all have them. So that's I just wanted to share that. I know we shouldn't be self-confessing, but I wanted to share that anecdote to reflect on prejudice. Any thoughts? Any thoughts from anyone?
Yes.
Please, Patrick.
As we've gone over a very fine job on this condensed version of the rise of the dictators in the 20s and the 30s. It is worth looking for a lesson. As you put it, you have to unlearn some things, and if we consider that that Germany was such an advanced country at the beginning of the 20th century, you know, in their scholastic endeavors and in the arts, they had a public health system. They had a social security or an old age system that Bismarck had put together. These things were far and away beyond what England or France or America had. And the Great War destroyed all the illusions that, you know, you could do that and spend all that time and money. But one thing that was similar in all of those nations that fell to dictatorships in the 20s and 30s, and that was that their societies had become decadent.
Patrick, you paused.
Our computer connection is unstable right now, and it comes and goes.
Okay. He was making beautiful points.
Can you say it over? Because it was really good.
I'll get him back on my computer.
I am going to rewatch this session just for Patrick even. That was great.
Oh, it's working. It's working now.
Oh, there we go.
So I think the point, I'll be very concise here. All of the people in those countries were seeking some order. And as a German lady that I've seen so many times on film said, you know, when people are desperate, they will follow a man. They will follow a strong man, and don't think that you wouldn't.
Agree.
That was a German person. So not that there's that much more credibility in being, you know, from the country you're talking about, but there it is. And they were as gratified by Hitler's promise to you know, fulfill the Kaiser's wishes, you know, to find Germany a place in the sun, along with all the other great powers. But they were all looking for order. They were tired of crime and corruption. And in a bizarre kind of way, Hitler and Mussolini and Franco and Stalin, they were very, and I'll use the word here just in its social context, they were all very puritanical. They all believed there should be order. Crime should be punished. The great difference, of course, was they decided who was a criminal and they decided the level of punishment too.
Right.
But they're, you know, people joke, they say Mussolini promised to make the trains run on time, and he did. And he also refurbished all of Rome. He promised the people, I will restore the Roman Empire. And we forget the fact that for all of the brutality of the brown shirts, the black shirts there in Italy, he actually did do that. He really cleaned things up. I mean, even the Pope went and made a treaty with him to guarantee the property of Vatican City. Everyone was willing to deal with Mussolini.
Yeah.
So we tend to understand the dictators as some sort of an aberration. They were all too human, which is the frightening point, I think, at least to me. That's my offering on that point. Thank you very much.
Excellent points. Thank you very much, Patrick. And we have Bruce, and then we're going to continue. I think we have just a few more slides, so then we'll end. Thank you, Bruce. Please.
No, he's too eloquent to follow. Go on.
Oh. Bruce, you had your hand. Go for it. Do you have anything to share? No, you're good? Okay.
Matt. Go on.
Okay, excellent, Bruce. Yes, Patrick, you're a hard ship to follow. So, moving on.
Thanks, Bruce. Way to go, Bruce.
The spread of communism. We talked about this communism. With the Russian Revolution of 1917, the Bolshevik Party came to power and fully embraced Marxist ideologies. This resulted in the spread of communism in Europe during the 20th century and the establishment of communist governments in Eastern and Central Europe after World War II. The spread of communism was so extensive, but by 1985, 1/3 of the world lived under a communist system. 1/3 of the whole planet.
Yeah.
This significantly contributed to the spread of materialist theories and undermined religious beliefs. Because at the heart of communism, as you know, is they're against religion and is pretty much materialist theories. That's really what it is. So this the rise of irreligion that the beloved Guardian is saying, these ideologies, this was the spread of communism. That's one of them. Now, the other one was Charles Darwin's theories of origin of species, the evolution aspect. So these were the theories that were rampant. So this is, and I'm so snapshotting all of these things, as dear Patrick said. I'm so hyper condensing this. These are so rich, and I'm just giving you just snapshots. In some communist countries, there were systematic and aggressive campaigns against religion. For example, in the Soviet Union, a new phase of anti-religious persecution started in 1928 after legislation was introduced to severely restrict religious activities in order to promote atheism. And we highlighted this when we talked about Ish Chabad. If you recall in our last session, this anti-religious campaign that was going on. So the main target with the largest number of followers, as you all know, is the Russian Orthodox Church. The Russian Orthodox Church, very large. Though other religious groups, including the Baha'i community in Ishkhabad, were affected. And as mentioned, I sent you that article by Mojan Momen. I don't know if you read it, but the faith in Ishkhabad was flourishing. I mean, truly flourishing. I just gave you small snapshots of pictures of the Ishkhabad community in our last part, but truly it was going from strength to strength before this campaign by the anti-religious campaign that was being orchestrated by the Soviet Union. to crush any form of religion was being undertaken. Here's some propaganda that was becoming widespread everywhere. It says religion slows. This is what it says: religion slows the 5-year plan. Down with religious holidays. Down with religious holidays. So there was. This was as you can see, that guy with the workers' axe. That's kind of like the symbol of the communist, or the hammer, the workers' hammer, and they're crushing any form of religion, and that's the Orthodox Church, the Russian Orthodox Church. And in the bottom picture, you can see that's the workers, and they're moving their tractor to take down the Russian Orthodox. And you can see the first one is Russian Orthodox, and then there's other ones that are Jews in that. So they're going, and one of them is a Muslim. So they're really trying to just crush any aspect of religion in Russia. So here's just another caption. It says, "For thousands of years, ye have been contending in warfare and strife." This is Baha'u'llah speaking. It is enough. Now is the time for unity. Thousands of years. Here Baha'u'llah saying, people, it's enough. Now we're getting into the last line of paragraph 11. Last line of paragraph 11. Now he's flipping the script. So he's talked about all these conflagration, contentions, strifes. Now he's saying, how great is this cause? How great is it? So, Miss Karen, would you like to read? Go for it.
In paragraph 11, the beloved guardian indicates that the crisis faced by the Baha'i community at that juncture of history was foreseen by His Holiness Abdu'l-Baha. Abdu'l-Baha asserts that the evident greatness of the Baha'i cause has provoked the attacks on the Baha'i community, not only by religious leaders, but also by proponents of current material, cultural, or political views.
So that we addressed that. So keep going, Karen. You're doing great.
The greatness of the cause can be perceived in a number of contexts. The forces released through the revelation of Baha'u'llah were already in operation to prepare the world for the establishment of his world order.
So there is a great book by Hooper Dunbar, it's The Forces of Our Time. And so I encourage you to add that to your reading list if you don't have it. And it's, and you can see the terminology, the forces. So as to Tesfai's question regarding what is the forces, happening in the world currently, what's going on, great read Mr. Hooper Dunbar's book. So add that to your reading list. Tesfai, go for it. Read this one, and I think this may be our close, either last slide or one more. I believe this is our last slide. Go for it, Tesfai.
All right. In one of his tablets, Abdu'l-Baha states, "O my friend, verily the cause is great, and the penetration of the word of God in the temple of all religions is similar to the pervasion of the soul in a sound body. By the life of Baha, verily the power of the kingdom of God has taken hold of the pillars of the world and has possessed all the nations. Thou wilt surely find the standards of the Testament waving in all regions, enchanting of the verses of unity, raised and exalted assemblies, and the lights of the sun of truth, and its heat dispersing the thick clouds massed on the horizon." That's beautiful, man.
I know. The imagery, the imagery of
really
the language of here. Obviously, this is translated, you know, I cannot read Persian as some of our friends here in audience, but just the translated here is beautiful, saying how this faith, how this the lights of the sun of truth and its heat dispersing the thick clouds massed on the horizon. The imagery of that is incredible. The forces of darkness are these thick clouds, and this small band of believers, this small group of individuals, the followers of Baha'u'llah, like a little cloud of sight, has become strong, and the sun is dispersing all these forces of darkness. Beautiful. I love it. And it gives you so much energy. I don't know about you, but it gives you a lot of energy because our faith is great. Our faith is so great. And, you know, it gives you excitement. I don't know.
It is.
It says the teachings of the Baha'i faith, also represent lofty standards. So this is the prelude to all these standards we're coming up to. The teachings of the Baha'i faith also represent lofty standards set for human thoughts, attitudes, and deeds, which are on the extreme contrast. Do you remember the words, those two words that in part one that I said that it's in contrast? Do you remember what the terminology I used in part one? I will give you anyone extra bonus point to this.
The contrast.
No one? Diametrically opposed. Diametrically opposed. That is the term.
Is it disintegration and integration?
No, Miss Mary McGregor, I was thinking, but good thought. The terminology I was going for was diametrically opposed, okay? So this is, so diametrically opposed means it's 180 degrees, complete opposite, okay? This is the words of the beloved guardian. The standard, and when I was presented this to the Universal House of Justice, they highlighted and they put that in, they said, put that in highlight, you know, in part one, and said, that's why in my first part, that is highlighted in red, you know, because that is a term that they wanted to, per se, stand out. That the standards of the old world order, the standards, the thoughts, the attitudes, the deeds, anything that is there, if you do the complete opposite of, you would probably be in the right. You know, anything that they're doing, just do the opposite. You'll probably be in the correct. That's what the Guardian is saying. Diametrically opposed. And he says, which are on the extreme contrast to the vices, iniquities that are underlined on the ongoing oppression experienced by the people during the 1930s. So, and yeah, I think this is our last slide. This is definitely our last slide. So who would like to be our last reader? Anyone? Our closer, as they say. Anyone with a voice? We've all been so patient tonight.
I can read it.
Please, Tesfaya. Thank you for being closer tonight.
Okay, Abdul Baha illustrates such contrasts when he urges us to endeavor with heart and soul until the world war becomes the world of peace, the world of darkness, the world of light. Satanic conduct be turned into heavenly behavior. The ruined place become built up. The sword be turned into the olive branch. The flash of hatred becomes the flame of the love of God, and the noise of the gun, the voice of the kingdom. The soldiers of days and the soldiers of life, all the nations of the world, one nation. All race as one race, and all national anthems harmonized into one melody.
Beautiful. Thank you, Tesfai. Excellent reading.
Thank you.
So this is the standard, dear friends. This is what we're working for. This is what every Baha'i should be striving for. And as you know, that is this great sculpture. I believe it was, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's Rodin, the sculpture of the, you know, beating it into a plowshare, the swords into plowshares from biblical, but I might be wrong who the sculptor of that is, but that is the idea of it, to beat the swords into plowshares. And that's it, dear friends. Great job, everyone. Part 4 is come to a close. And thank you very much.
It's so beautiful.
So
what is our homework? Our homework.
Yes, Miss Yuda Miller, staying on top of it as always. So,
yes, work.
So what is your homework? Let me...
No assignments, you said. Books.
Yes, yes. So next is reading...
Ehsan, I have a question from the last session.
Yes, please.
Yeah, last time, you know, when I asked Dr. Bayat, he answered that about the Mufti is to be the leader of the
Jerusalem.
Sunni Jerusalem, yeah. But they have another title in my mind is to be the Imam. But I just want to know the Imam and the Mufti, what's to be the distinguished between these two powers of the rank? Is it to be elected also by the religious leaders, or how is this going on in Islamic religion?
Yes, an imam is a religious leader, but the mufti is the one who comes up with decrees, is the one who has studied the scriptures and come up with decrees that the Muslims have to follow. Mufti comes from fatwa, and imam just means a leader.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you very much.
Good to have you, Dr. Bayat, to clarify on some of those topics such as that. Well, that is it. The next section is 12 through 15, okay? 12 through 15, that is your homework. It's very exciting. I've kicked it up some notches since I sent it off to the research department, so it's pretty cool. And I'm going to, dear friends, let us have a closing prayer, and I will leave the session per se open so you guys can, you know, communicate, chat, or enjoy yourselves, okay? But truly, this is the highlight of my week, being with you guys, hearing your thoughts, seeing your faces. But thank you really from the bottom of my heart just to see you and to share this with you. So without any further ado, if anyone would like to share a prayer, please, so we can...
Prayer?
Sorry?
Can I say a prayer?
Yes, Saidi Jan, please, would love to, love it.
Intone, O my servant, the verses of God that have been received by thee, and intoned by them who have drawn nigh unto him, that the sweetness of thy melody may kindle thine own soul, and attract the breath of all men, whoso recited in the privacy of his chamber the verses revealed by God. The scattering angels of the Almighty shall scatter abroad the fragrance of the words uttered by his mouth, and shall cause the heart of every righteous man to throb. Though he may at first remain unaware of its effect, yet the virtue of the grace vouchsafed unto him must needs sooner or later exercise its influence upon his soul. Thus have the mysteries of the revelation of God been decreed by virtue of the will of him who is the source of power and wisdom, Baha'u'llah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Truly good to have all of you. Thank you,
All right.
Mr.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good
See you
night.
next week. Yeah.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good
Bye.
night.
Good night.
Night.
Bachman, Afsane, aloha.
Hey,
How are you?